So I don't know what these are. Oh, what about this one? I'm calling them fuckers. And so we have knives under our clothes. When their backs are turned, we'll stab the fuckers. Would you like that one? The Rosen sisters are my make-believe, fantastic group of women who have helped me live with World War II. They're a group of women that I created in my mind, and they're not victims, though they were part of the Holocaust. They're definitely not victims. They're resistors. They're successful resistors. Not only that, they enjoyed themselves while being resistors. When I retired, I decided to go to Poland, to Staszów, where my family were murdered by the Nazis. I felt it was time to look at that part of my life that I had set aside while working, and to come to terms with my history. Staszów is the name of the small town that my mother was born and raised in. It's very close to Krakow, about an hour and a half's bus ride from Krakow. During the 1930s, 40s, there were 10,000 residents in Staszów. Half the town was Jewish, so there were 5,000 Jews, and all of them, with the exception of one or two, were all murdered. So half the town was killed. And I also visited most of the concentration camp sites in Poland and Germany. And so I saw a lot of memorials to many, many individuals and groups, but there was nothing that reflected my family. There are no records of them at all. So I decided a memorial was needed, even if it was my own memorial. And then I decided to paint the women in my family. I'm a feminist, so it was the women in my family that I was most curious about. And when I say women, it was two women, my aunt and my grandmother. So I started painting them, and I added myself and my mother to the paintings. And the first paintings are of the four of us in a concentration camp. And we're victims. We're actually in the bunkers, we're in the latrines, and we look very vulnerable, and we look like victims about to die. They were very somber, no color. And after a while I realized I wasn't having any fun. I was tired of our being victims. I didn't want us to be victims anymore. Well, they started out being the Rosen Sisterrrz, Sisterrrz, the Rosen Sisters, and they evolved into the Rosen Resistors, RRZ. Rosen is the name of my mother's family. It is my mother's family name. Eventually, I took us out of the concentration camp and into the forest, and the paintings became bigger. And gradually, I turned us into resistance fighters. I added more color, I added more women, and then I ended up with 6 women whose faces I thought were really interesting. And I'm including myself. And the women you see in the painting are the final characters in my paintings. So my late mother, my late sister, my late aunt, myself, a friend, and her daughter.
So Hinda invited me to come and see an art show, and I can't recall if I knew that I was featured in it. I really think I didn't know. And when I went to go see her art show, there was me and there was my mom, huge, and a bunch of Hinda's family, and I thought, wow, I didn't know what to think. I was a little bit shocked and a little bit horrified and a little bit thrilled all at the same time.
Well, I remember myself smiling and holding a gun. Her mother and my mother were the very best of friends. They probably came over to this country about the same time. Her parents lived in my parents' home, and she was conceived there. Well, this is what we all say anyways. We get a kick out of it.
Eventually, I wanted to modernize the Rosen resistors and put them in even more absurd situations, because by this time I really wanted to have more fun with them. I wanted them to be more colorful. Eventually, I started adding text to the paintings in the form of a thought bubble, because by this time I wanted them to start looking like a graphic novel or cartoons. And I wanted the women to be quite crass and to really say what they were feeling.
I'm trying to remember exactly when I first talked to Hinda. We talked a couple times on the phone. I think we actually met in a social situation, if I remember correctly, and we set up a date for her to come and sort of show me her work, because we had thought about putting it up in the synagogue. We have an art gallery of sorts that we've kept. I do a lot of work with local artists that we learn usually mystical text together, and then people produce art. So it made sense to sort of check it out and see if we could put together a showing. And she came with quite a bit of stuff, and it was kind of, I was a little bit afraid because she was unrolling like good size canvases, because some of them are much bigger than I had ever imagined, and trying to make sure that they stayed clean and that they were flat, and we found like ways to sort of lay them all out, which was a bit of an exercise. But she was very particular and very like clear about how she was going to do it, and I just sort of stayed back and watched.
I really liked the idea of working with this dark humor, of working with a different way of viewing the Holocaust, and using laughter and confidence as a weapon. I wanted to imagine us being resistors rather than victims. I mean, that's not to say there wasn't a strong resistance movement. There was, but it was small. I've done research, and the interesting thing is that only 1.5% of all communities were resistors. That includes Jews, that includes students, that includes unions, it includes religious groups. I mean, the majority of people are bystanders. In my paintings, I wanted a larger resistance group. The smiles started out as being just very small, and then they became grins. I wanted this particular series to have that sense of absurdity, because it is an absurd fantasy. And I wanted the women to be this caricature, these crazy, sweet-smiling feminist women, crazy Wonder Women, or
my soul, babe. I need you, babe. Coming back home, babe. Mercy on my soul, baby. I need you, baby. Coming back home, baby. Mercy, mercy, 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 baby. Coming back home, baby. Mercy on my soul, baby. Coming back home, baby. Send it back to me, baby. Hey, mercy, mercy, baby.
Well, of course, growing up, there was, I mean, you didn't attach humor to Holocaust. It was all horrific and you know, I can't even think of a word to describe it. So it wasn't a part of my life, and one never laughed about anything. So I was born in Canada in 1940 when the war was going on in Europe, and my mother was well aware of the war and very worried about her family. I don't know when communication ended with her parents and sister and other relatives. We had a large family in Stashev. She was consumed with worry and traumatized. She had what was called a nervous breakdown at one point, and she was hospitalized. And she passed her trauma on to me, as is the case in most situations like that. I was fully traumatized. I got it all. It has remained with me. And I'm told that it takes about 5 generations to get rid of early traumatization. Painting, artwork, is an activity that I can become engaged in, that takes me out of my head for a while. There are moments when I'm drawing, painting, that I don't feel depressed because I'm focusing on the subject matter I'm doing. There are times when I feel somewhat confident in doing artwork, and that's a good feeling. Never felt that way in my academic career. Never felt that confidence. I mean, it was only in later life when I started painting that I needed to add that humor just to be able to live with it. Because otherwise it was something it drives me crazy. So I needed that relief, that comic relief.
There's always been all kinds of Holocaust jokes, right? If you go to various kibbutzim in Israel, like Lochamei Getaot, which were people who were connected to the resistance fighters who formed their own kibbutz, they're constantly full of dark Holocaust humor, right? And there's a sense of owning that. But I hadn't really seen it in an art form. In an art form that was clearly from a really skilled artist, right? It wasn't just a simple comic. There's something comic book-like, but there's something very deep about Hinda's art as well.
When I introduced her work in my class, the students loved it, 100%. Most of the students wrote in their course feedback that it was the highlight of their experience in the course. Humor, it's incredibly empowering. There are sort of 2 ways, I think, to look at humor. The first is that it's sort of condescending. and derisive and sort of hostile to society. It's kind of you're taking on this outsider perspective. But at the same time, humor, I think, very much speaks from the ground up, and it's about your perspective, and understanding that your perspective can completely transform your experience of a thing.
My first series, the drawings, my second series, the women in the forest, my third series, this very large group of women who are still very serious and very representative of what the resistors looked like. None of these series included Hitler, because for me, including him was almost incomprehensible. I felt there's no way I can draw this man or paint this man. It would be just too difficult. Even looking at him, looking at images of him was difficult for me. In my later work, when the women began to really enjoy themselves, I thought, I have to include the Führer. And so I started drawing him as a cartoon, and found that it wasn't so bad. In fact, he lends himself to being a cartoon, and I found, by golly, I really enjoyed drawing and painting him, because then I felt empowered that I could do whatever I wanted to him. I could make him as ugly as I wanted. I could change his body shape. I could make him look absolutely absurd. And so that was fun. That was good. However, among the Jewish community, many members of the Jewish community, they didn't see this as something that was funny. They didn't see him as a cartoon character. They felt that this was too sensitive a subject, and that I shouldn't be tackling him the way I did. It is difficult for some members of the Jewish community to to enjoy my paintings, of course. And that saddens me because I really want my paintings to be enjoyed. I mean, I want people to get what it is I'm trying to do, and the last thing I'm trying to do is to offend anyone or to be insensitive. I mean, I'm not.
I don't know how Jewish people would take to seeing somebody holding a gun and smiling at the same time. The Holocaust is close to me. My mother lost many of her family in the Holocaust, so it's very close to me. It did bother me, but as I said, I have accepted that this is the way she wants to do it. I don't have any problems with using humor as long as it's tastefully done. And I think Hinda's was tastefully done.
So, you forget about art form. Like, we're having, we still struggle with what I was calling the elephant in our soul, right? We haven't figured out a path to real reconciliation yet, right? We've got the people who kind of hold the Holocaust as holy, and it creates a big piece of their Jewish identity. So part of it is your identity in terms of Judaism, is it Mount Sinai and Revelation, or is it Auschwitz? I certainly hope that it's Mount Sinai. Not to negate the experience at Auschwitz, and not to negate the Shoah, but to try to do some kind of healing so we can move towards whatever's going to be next.
I think it's wonderful. I think it's so fantastic to approach the Holocaust. I don't know if it's appropriate to say in a positive way, but in a way of dealing with it that's positive.
Part of it tells me that if you're able to start dealing with humor, it means that we've done some healing, right? It's not that sacred cow anymore. We can begin to talk a little bit more about it. I think humor also gives you an avenue to emote in ways that you might not normally feel comfortable emoting, right? That laughter is a certain kind of release. And I think humor allows for that. I think that when I first encountered her work, I kind of had a sense of, right on, good on you. Like you can take that pot shot at Nazism. That part of, I think, by degrading Nazism, we can begin living as the antithesis of Nazism.
Being fearless, kind of, about how you express or sort of acknowledge your own vulnerability. I think humor has a lot to do with finding a way to talk about how you're vulnerable without kind of falling to pieces because of it.
I am sick and tired of being a victim and having had so many of my family murdered and being the victim of discrimination, prejudice, anti-Semitism. So in my portrayal of women, I attempt to show women in a totally different way than women are portrayed in popular media. They look like real women. They're not tall, young, and they're not skeletons. So that is, for me, definitely a form of resistance.
It is, I think, unusual to picture women, particularly elderly women, particularly jovial, mischievous elderly women, in the context of the Holocaust, and in such a realistic way. I think that's also why her work is so delightful and funny to look at. Not because you're laughing at these older women in and of themselves, but because you're this incredible contrast, again, between the heaviness of the subject matter and the brutality of the context, and then the sassiness of these very finally realistically portrayed women, where you don't have to dress them up as superheroes in order to communicate strength. You don't have to make them beautiful in order to communicate strength. They can be exactly what they are, and that's precisely what makes them strong.
Well, they're gutsy. They feel good about how they appear. They feel good about their physical appearance. They're strong. They can hold a weapon. Tough, confident, funny. They've got a good sense of humor. They're enjoying themselves. All the traits that I would like to have that I don't feel I have.
Typically, when you talk about Holocaust representation, you tend to break things down into something a little tidier, like looking at the first generation, the second generation, and the third generation. And you see this kind of more or less natural progression in terms of taking more risks, being more confrontational, and more creative in how they choose to talk about it. With Hinda, you see that development within her own work. You see 3 generations of thinking and development within a single body of work. And so in that sense, I think it's quite extraordinary.
I think it's healthy, the way that she's approaching it. And not only is it healthy, but it sort of makes resistance feel more natural. And I think that that's important. Instead of feeling so victimized by the Holocaust, she's given us all an opportunity to think of us as something else, which is inspiring.
All my paintings eventually run their course. I just get tired of doing the same old. I'm presently now doing comic books. And my protagonist is a woman named Bela, and she wants to be a world-famous artist, but she's lazy and she never does any artwork. But Bela's not me. The painting on the wall is the last of the series. They're in space. They're, who knows what they are, angels, astronauts. They're gone from the earth. They're no longer earthlings. Certainly I don't mourn them at all. I'm glad I don't have to work on such a large scale anymore. And I felt that I had said what I needed to say, and a certain amount of relief because I now could go on to new subject matter. One thing I really like about the Rosen sisters is that they're not depressed. I've never known them to be depressed. They're having a good time, having a good time. What I'm hoping is that viewers see that this is one way a Jewish woman who has had the experience of family murdered by the Holocaust, how she deals with it. That's as simple as that, how one woman deals with the Holocaust, how one woman deals with World War II. For me, it's a medicine. It helps being here on Earth.